what about what has happened? Well, as one of the players said in the middle of the first session was, wow, things just got political. Well, because it's me and I'm playing superheroes and supervillains, and there isn't any other way. I can't think of any. So we have here in Norrköping the Workers' Museum, which is a museum here of long standing. It's a very distinctive triangular design or weirdly angled design out in the middle of the river and is, a notable bit of town architecture with a noble history of workers' solidarity, which here in this country, those kinds of things actually take on a little more genuine social and historical weight than their complete absence in my native country. Okay, so anyway, the Workers' Museum, where I have been many times and seen lots of their exhibits and shows that are put on there. Um, I had I had them on a school trip, and the school trip was to an exhibition there about racism, and the history, the troubled history of racism here in the region, um, which I thought was kind of a good idea, right? Good school trip. And I asked the kids what they did on school trips, and it was pretty hilarious actually to have 5 very candid statements about how they behaved and what they would be doing on a school trip. Very definitely not, dutiful little students. So that's what they were doing. And of course, the father of 2 of the kids was there. In the fiction, of course, as just he had to be there. He got stuck. He got stuck with it. He had to be one of the parental, participants. Where to go? First of all, what kind of characters are we talking about? We determined that Jonas' character would have been a superhero of some standing. In fact, I beefed him up to 3rd level for that purpose. But unbeknownst to him, his 2 misbehaving sons had played with chemicals. They figured out he was a superhero and then they went and did a chemical project in school, and turned themselves into superheroes. And this is because actually both of those people had rolled chemical power. So one of them had done the carbon and oxygen thing, and then the other, who had a little wider array of powers, went with sulfur. So the idea was that they had gotten into the chemistry lab and had, were allegedly working on a cool project, but turned themselves into chemical superheroes. And then the other two players at the time, because a third was added a couple sessions in, the other 2 players at the time, we figured, they're all friends, and so they dealt themselves in because you can't keep a secret. One of them rolled some pretty awesome stuff and actually creates effectively a black hole. And he has, lowered charisma, so he's really spooky and puts people off, and he, flies and this ball of darkness and lightning shoots out of it, and it's kind of cool actually. Very. And the player's delighted. He gets to be dark and scary and black hole-ish. It's awesome. So another fellow went with sort of a tech motif and has a cool fake hand that can do all sorts of things, and he puts like a USB into his head to get these extra skills and stuff like that. So basically the soft story here is the dad finding out, that he's got this whole bunch of underage superheroes under his nose, and that he's got to kind of, wrestle them into some semblance of decency. We're not playing that for major drama or anything, but just as kind of a context as we go along. Because, the police know who he is, and his security clearance by the numbers in the book is not that bad. So he's, and he's got a high charisma too. He has a heightened charisma, and so he's very much, a municipal superhero. And all of a sudden he's kind of den dad of superheroes who can do who knows what. And even one of them is actually still unknown to the others and lurks, surrounds them, and helps them and stuff. And thus far has been able to submerge with his water breathing, because he's turns out to be kind of, what is he, kind of turtle like or something? But anyway, he's got this shell and he can breathe underwater, and so anyway, he's been helping, but he submerges and they don't know about him yet, which is pretty funny. That particular player, as they started rolling and he kept getting this weird stuff, he's like, what am I going to do with water breathing? Well, so Sweden is a very watery place, and this city, like most of the cities here, is very much built on a river system. So water travel and breathing is surprisingly effective after all. So, what happened at this workers' museum? All right, the white supremacists, the nativists, which, not to get too fine a point on this, is a really big deal here. They wanted to make a point, and a local group using their real name. Sorry, guys. They basically take this teenager and pump his head full of nonsense and turn him into the superhero. He grows, 10 meters tall, and he lights on fire, and he, I actually looted a little bit from one of the Villains and Vigilantes supplements, one of their adventures, and took that character and kind of changed it a little bit for this guy. So a lot of the sort of interesting features, the fact that he has to actually use combustibles in order to grow, things like that, that's the kind of thing that you make up when you're playing, make up when you make up a character. A lot of things that would be very codified in other role-playing games, you're supposed to kind of say how this goes with that, and then create a relationship that isn't on paper anywhere else. Well, I utilized that logic from that built character for this character, and it ended up, with somebody who can control carbon and oxygen, and for somebody who can do these powerful zaps, which if they miss, do bad things to the buildings behind the person, which happened. So the facing building to the museum. Now, I take credit. My bad guys blew up a corner of the upper floor of the Workers' Museum, for which I am sorry, but they're bad guys, so they did. The destruction of the other building face, that was all them. That was a missed roll. That I didn't do that. So still though, a lot of cool things happened. One, the fellow who lightning blasted, our giant flaming person, was getting grabbed out of the air, by that flaming person, and would have done terrible damage to him, except that given the initiative, our chemical guy who had already floated onto the burning person and was trying to diminish, his burningness, actually had succeeded and deflamed the guy's hand. So when he grabbed our flying guy, he didn't do his damage to him. So all sorts of things like that, went up, down, in various characters' favor or not. A certain ruthlessness on the part of our youthful heroes, particularly when the identities and goals of their foes, because there was a whole bunch of thugs, like armed thugs, who were facilitating this and setting the bomb and, were basically more in charge than this youthful supervillain was. Our friends, our heroes, yours and mine, were not kind to these fellows. And one of them was actually thrown out of the top floor of the Workers' Museum. And then when one of the superheroes had a chance to, catch him, he didn't. He just punched him out of the air and let him go where he was going to go. And I was like, oh, that's... One can't say it's not justice, perhaps, but, it's like, ooh. Jeff D. and Jack Herman have something to say about that kind of behavior. So Um, anyway, we're going to proceed, as continuing with adventures after this one encounter, which actually looked really grim for the heroes at first, because I mean, this dude was nasty, and the goals of the bad guys were really bad, and they were holding people hostage in the lower floor of the museum. And I have to say, our heroes did a really nice job of kicking all their asses. A couple of very interesting points that I only discovered in play. When you're playing you're GMing and you're playing somebody who is armed with a gun, a handgun, which in Sweden is a little more sort of thematically, it's weighty compared to the States. And I, not really thinking about it and playing this non-player character, actually had the dude unload at the hero. And I suddenly had this line feeling. Okay, this player is playing himself in a role-playing game, and it's fairly naturalistic in a lot of ways, right? As the way I described it. You got that, right? I mean, there's a lot of things about the games that are very naturalistic. They're based on referencing reality. And I had the sensation of, I don't want to actually be shooting you, right? I mean, the sense that this was, grim and potentially, I don't know how. The player seemed fine with it, but I definitely felt it. I was like, whoa, that was close. I am not really sure I want to be putting a bullet into this character, not because I don't want to hurt player characters as a general thing, but much more in the sense of this specific game. Whoa, I really felt that. Fortunately, no harm was done to anybody. But the dice, I was looking at that die going, where are you taking me? So that's one thing. Another interesting thing about it is that American conventions for naming superheroes don't work in Swedish. So I wanted to call the supervillain, they had given him the name, he is the White Flame, which is completely understandable in English as a supremacist, visual. You can even imagine, the flash art that somebody might tattoo on themselves for such a thing. But it doesn't translate. You translate it literally to Swedish, and it's nonsensical. It's like, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have, I mean, the nature of the adjective and the object just, it doesn't work. It's not a cool name, and it can't be. So I have to learn the right idiomatic creation of iconic terminology in that kind of slangy logo-ish way that superheroes have for this to work, because just using the American convention for the naming will not. So I noticed that the characters they've made up, a couple of them have given themselves super names, and they seem to be going with an interesting convention of like almost code. What is it? Like a letters dash number, kind of thing, some sort of a weird designation. That's, I think, comes off as kind of, mysterious or offbeat or something like that. And it's cool, if they do that. It just shows that things like, Scarlet Spider, are just not going to carry the same sense if we're speaking in Swedish. All sorts of things to go on. I'm continuing with our next adventure. I went through all of the improvement mechanisms and stuff like that. I've just reviewed them all, and some of them are quite odd and interesting. But we're going to apply them tonight so they can see how play changes their sheets. And we'll cruise this time, instead of breaking more pieces of motor shopping. I went and got a big driving map, a big map of Stockholm. So we're going up to the capital tonight to see what gets broken there. What I rolled for that, I decided to do some rolling for the adversaries this time. I had some ideas, and the dice were kind. I've got some pretty awesome molluscan aliens that are going to be in cahoots with, security services and stuff like that. So they're criminals because they're like bad guys working with like bad people. So they'll count if apprehended and turned over to the proper authorities, of course. But hey, it's a watery city. I didn't choose the mollusk powers. That was all the dice. Time for some fun.